In this lesson, we're going to learn how to refine and then export the map from Photoshop and add it to the terrain model in 3D Max. So the first thing we can do is go and merge our entire file. We just want to leave out the site mesh template, which is the overlay over here. So let's go ahead and just delete this file since we don't need that reference anymore. And let's select all of these other layers below them just by holding down Shift and selecting from the first to the last. Right click, merge all of that. It'll take 2-3 seconds until it's all merged. And I just wanted to leave a little side note here that the file that you have in the project files folder is a highly reduced size. You have a file which is 1 by 1000 pixels, in other words a 1K image, and the one that I'm working on is 10,000 by 10,000, so it's a little bit bigger, and I'm not necessarily going to be uploading the full Photoshop file since it is over a gig in size. So next thing we're going to do is crop. So you can just crop from the outside to the outside, so you make sure you get the entire image in. That's just going to crop this area down. And now you see that you have two layers. The one below is obviously your texture, and the one above is going to be your overlay. So next I just want to come in and locally scrutinize every area of this texture and just have a look if there's something that I can locally fix. So using the healing brush tool, you can have replace on. Just right click on your screen if you want to increase your diameter. And then just go and press Alt and then click anywhere on the file where you want to have a reference. So I'm just going to pause the video now and erase some of these people, and I'm just also going to erase some of the really big rocks that are pointing out in this area, since they do look a little bit repetitious. So I'm going to do that now and then continue the video once this little bit of healing brush refinement is done. So now all of that small detail that was repeated or that was out of place has now been brushed away using the healing brush. And just remember that there's nothing worse than having a visible tile within your entire scene. For example, these patches still look a little bit tiled, but at least it doesn't look tiled in a square fashion. So these can still be refined and neatened out, but I'm not going to worry about that. I think that you understand the workflow by now for me to be able to carry on. The next stage is to go and just separate your image so that you have a high-res version here in the middle. So we're going to do that. You can do it in a few different ways. The one way is to go and duplicate your entire file, so you can make a copy, and then zoom into the area that you want to go and crop down. So find the first point, for example this one here, and then just start cropping down your image. So now you obviously have the other point to find, so you can just zoom out using your navigator window, and you just want to go and find where that other point is, and it should be somewhere around there. I'm now going to zoom in and then just go and find that point and just adjust it so that all of those corners fit as closely as possible. So now what I've done is I've got this internal image that I can keep at the full resolution. In my case, I have a very high res image to start with, so it's going to be 4,800 by 4,600 pixels. So that's a decent resolution just to get some at least semi-high res visuals into that entire site. And then this image here will then be reduced in size so that it doesn't interfere with my RAM. So you don't want to get an image that's too big. And remember, if you really do have an old machine and you need to chop it up even more, then you can obviously separate it into about, let's say, 4 separate squares. So you can just divide it horizontally and vertically and basically apply those textures separately. So what I'm going to do now is save these two images, and I'm going to then load them into 3D Max. Just before doing that, I want to think about how I'm going to do the reflection map. So if this is going to be called the diffuse, let's now go and create a reflection map. So for that, all we need to do is really paint the area where the ocean is lying. So everything that is going to be slightly reflective, we just need to paint a mask over it. So you can start by tracing out using the lasso. Second option is you can just start painting immediately if you like. So you can take a brush which is relatively not too small, not too big, and increase the hardness slightly, make sure the opacity is high enough, and on a separate layer start painting out where you would like that ocean to be reflective. So either the selection or the painting method will work just fine, and just paint over that area. I'm going to pause the video quickly and just do the rest of that. So here is our white painted area which overlaps the ocean, and I just also wanted to show you a third option that you could use if the color that you're trying to select is quite unique. Go across to select and then color range, and then just click on the area where the ocean is and just move the fuzziness factor up and down until you get a white area that is selected in this part. So depending on how high that fuzziness is, you may need to increase it. So let's go now and try increase that fuzziness range, and then you can go and manually just add the areas that weren't selected and also deselect anything else just using the Alt key while you select using the lasso tool. So Shift just to add the selection and Alt to reduce that selection. So now you can go and use the paint bucket and you can go and drop that. So anyway, I'm still going to use the original method. I just wanted to show you that there are all those different options. Next you want to do is to add a black solid underlay underneath that entire white layer, and you can then go and merge the two. So this texture will now be saved out as a reflection map, and it will tell 3D Max that this ocean, being the white part, is going to be more reflective than, or not reflective at all, compared to the green part that will not be reflective. So reflective, not reflective. Right, so I'm going to pause the video now. I'm going to save this out as a separate file and this out as a lower res separate file. So to make the size lower, all you need to go and do is image and then image size, and then just reduce that image size to the biggest size that your computer can successfully load. So right now I'm pausing and then we'll open up again in 3D Max in a second. So now we're back in 3ds Max, and what we can do is apply our texture to these different objects. We no longer need the unwrap UVW since that was used just to print out that template for ourselves. And if you have a look here, the double layer is not necessarily needed now that we have that reflection map. But you could of course choose to apply both images one underneath each other and make this one slightly translucent so that you can see some depth. Perhaps you can even paint a different texture underneath so that you can see something happening underneath the water. So we can even go and simplify our scene slightly by deleting the layer underneath. That'll just make it slightly easier. And we can now go and texture this outer part. Let's just press M to open up our material editor, and let's start by making a new V-Ray material. And this one's going to be called Site Far. And into the diffuse slot, let's put a bitmap, and let's go into our project files, and in the texture folder you will find the Site Texture Far Diffuse that you're going to load in here. You can just choose to show that. And if you scroll down, once you just go to parent, you can scroll down and open up your maps. And here in the reflection, reflection will be up here. You can just click on none and then open up the bitmap, which is the reflection map. So that is this one. Now you can just double click on it. Let's right click and rotate so that we can see some of the ocean. Go all the way to the side where we see it. And let's turn on so that is all reflective. Let's turn on the background. And over here, let's just decrease the reflection to 25 to start off with. We may increase it later. We don't really need such a reflective ocean. And the reflective glossiness to 0.9. So it'll make it slightly blurry just to give it that shimmer. Next, we can go and create a similar material. So let's just right click, drag, and then copy that material. This one's going to be called Site Close. We can right click and clear the reflection since there's no reflection on that Site Close, and then scroll down and load up the Site Texture Close Diffuse file. If these files are still too big for you to render, or if if basically you're having issues with your RAM, the files aren't that massive, but you can always reduce them in Photoshop, and that way you can use them at a smaller scale. So now the site file will be applied to these two objects. Let's just assign that. And the close one will be assigned to that internal file here. So theoretically, if everything worked out fine, they should map on perfectly. You can also go to UVW and just add that, and you should be able to just fit that on. And if you look in the top view, you will notice that all of that is correctly mapped. Now for the last few seconds, let me just go and render out what we have, and let's see how this is looking. So to finish off the lesson, here is our rendered scene of that camera 6, and it'll just show you the slightly reflective sea, and you'll see more or less where the beach is ending. Here, this very faint line is the difference between the low and the high res texture. And just for one last image, let's go and render a closer view so that we can see whether the resolution is good enough of the grass next to this site. So I'm going to pause again, and we're just going to render another camera. So this is the view that we're getting from the first camera, and you can see that there's okay detail for now. You may want to increase it with some 3D realistic grass if you really want to go to those lengths, but more or less that is enough to get a couple of images out to your clients. You can see that the render time is still very low, the images are loading fine, and so far so good. Right, that's the end of this lesson. In the next lesson we're going to continue texturing the rest of the building, so hang around for that.